I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Emilia Jones, the star of the new film CODA. And I wanted to start here. I was watching the Gotham Awards where you won the Breakthrough Performer Award, and you mentioned in your speech that this film was bloody hard work. So I was curious because there's a lot of different elements to your performance. What was the hardest aspect of this role?
They were all really challenging in a different way. I think sign language was for sure the hardest in terms of I didn't just want to learn my lines in sign language. I wanted to actually learn the language, and I wanted to learn about the culture. So there was a lot that I had to cover and a lot that I had to learn because I really didn't know any sign language going into this project. But I found the singing challenging too, because I'd never had a singing lesson before CODA, and I kind of auditioned with this kind of gentle cover on my guitar, and then I turned up for my first singing session and it was like, oh, Etta James, Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, like Joni Mitchell, like the biggest songs ever. And I was 17 when I shot this movie, so my voice was still maturing, and so that was challenging. And then we recorded everything live on set too. I didn't really step into the booth, so it meant that I kind of had to sing in tune on set and sing these big songs, and I was having like 3 hours of sleep every night, so I did actually get sick while we were shooting. So it was bloody hard work. That's why I did say that, but it was honestly the most rewarding and amazing experience. And I feel so grateful that Sean kind of took a chance on me. I was British and I didn't fish and I didn't have a yes by any of the skills, but I worked hard and I had such an amazing time making the movie.
Yeah. And in terms of that singing aspect, it's interesting because we see Ruby in the beginning singing pretty openly out on the boat. But then when she's auditioning for the school choir, she's more hesitant, I think, more closed off. And we're gradually seeing her open up as the film goes along. And as far as your understanding of the character, what do you think it is that's holding her back from expressing herself in that way?
I think she has been bullied growing up because she's different and her family's different, and I think it just makes her insecure at school, and she it was fun to play because Ruby is kind of like two characters in one. When she's interpreting for her family, she's super confident. From the coders, I spoke to a lot of coders before I started shooting, and then on set, all of our interpreters on set were coders, and from all the coders that I spoke to, being a coder, you have this kind of, it's a sense of power, and it's a responsibility, and it's your thing. You've grown up doing it. It's something that you're good at, and you're protective of your family. And so she's super confident in that way. But then when she is at school, she's bullied and she's kind of shy and insecure. And I think she doesn't know if she can sing. I think if you're around the house and you're singing, your parents are your harshest critics, and they'd say, oh, like, don't try out for choir, or try out and have fun, but and Ruby doesn't have that, so she doesn't really know if she's good or not. And I think it's very daunting to find out in front of kids, especially as kids can be so mean at school. But Ruby grows and she kind of blossoms and she gains that confidence. And we were lucky because we shot most of the music scenes in order. So as Ruby's voice was kind of growing, mine was too, with all my singing lessons and singing every day. And I felt like super happy that Both Sides Now was towards the end of the shoot. I think it was in like the last week of filming. And by that point, I trained for 9 months prior to filming. And then it was such an intense shoot because it was only a 30-day shoot. And I kind of got emotional, I guess. It was towards the end of filming. I was so close to Marley, Troy, and Daniel, and I put so much into this and into prepping it. But it just meant because it was at the end of filming, my voice had grown, my sign language had grown, and then it was kind of putting all of these skills together. And I guess your first question was what was the most challenging. I guess that scene was the most challenging thing, because as an actor, you like options in the edit. But if you were to do, say, 6 takes of Both Sides Now, that scene, the only take that they can choose in the edit is the take where my sign language was correct. but you know, you're also singing live on set at the same time, and you know, I had to get into Berkeley, so I kind of had this pressure of like, oh, I have to sound good enough to get into one of the best music schools. And then tonally, you know, your acting has to be where it needs to be, and then your sign language. So it's kind of like multitasking under pressure. But it was nice that was towards the end of filming when Ruby had grown, and I guess I had kind of grown too.
Yeah, that's very meta. Yes.
Yeah.
And I was just noticing when I was watching the movie again recently how this is an ensemble film, but Ruby is having these one-on-one conversations with people like her father, her mother, her brother, her teacher, Miles, and each of those relationships is different, and the dynamic that you have with them is different. And I'm curious if one of those relationships felt the most resonant for you as Emilia, as a person, that felt like it was almost beyond acting or performance, in the sense that you were just really connecting with the other actor.
What an amazing question. I've never been asked that before. I have so much to say about every single one of those kind of scenes where we were one-on-one. But I guess the scene, I'm very close with my family. My mum's my best friend, and I'm very close with my dad. The scene with Troy at the back of the pickup truck, that one really hit me, I think, because I hadn't seen my dad in a year because I'd been filming, and I was really missing my dad. And Troy has a CODA daughter who's a similar age to me. And so we kind of had this father-daughter connection and bond in real life. And so that scene was really special because it didn't feel like acting. You know what independent movie making is like, you know, you're constantly running out of time or light, and that scene was, at the end of the day, we were up against it. And, you know, Troy and I knew that it was one of the biggest scenes in the movie. It's so important. But we were in this rush, and we were trying to figure out a way where Troy could feel the vibrations the best that he could. And we didn't want it to look like he was strangling me. And so it was this whole thing, and we were, you know, up against it, as I said. So we were trying to figure it out. And then Troy pulled away from me and he said, I'd give anything to hear you sing right now. And he kind of folded me into one of his hugs, and we just kind of sat there and hugged for a second. And Sean, I think, saw that we were both emotional because we both kind of had that connection in real life, and she decided to cross cover so we didn't have to do Troy's coverage and turn around and do mine. She was like, this is going to be a special scene, I can feel that you're both in it emotionally. And so we just kind of did it once. And that's why Sean's such an amazing director, because she's so instinctive, and she's so perceptive, and she's such an actor's director too. So that was a real special scene for sure. And I love Troy to bits and pieces. The scene with Marley too, it was towards the beginning of the shoot, and I guess I was still learning a lot about the culture and the nuances of sign, and I remember just sitting there and I was absolutely in awe. I felt like I was just, honestly, with most of the scenes with Marley and Troy and Daniel too, the scene with Daniel on the beach, like I was in awe of his performance. And all of those three scenes, it didn't feel like there were any cameras in the room, for sure. And that's, I guess, the first time that's kind of happened to me. It just, we were kind of living as these characters, and everything felt so emotional and real.
I imagine that's a very surreal feeling.
Yeah.
But I talked with Riz Ahmed last year for Sound of Metal, and he was talking about the physicality of sign language, where beyond the actual signing, there's also just a directness in the emotion of the body language. Yeah, which in his case, he was playing a character who became deaf, and you're playing a hearing character. But was that something that was sort of taught to you as you were learning ASL?
For sure. I think because in the 9 months of training, I had a deaf coach. He kind of taught me all about the culture, and he gave me a list of things. He was telling me that everyone is so direct in the deaf community, and you know, they'll say things that hearing people will maybe take offense to, but they're just caring, and they're just like asking a question. And the minute I met Marley, Troy, and Daniel, I just loved that they were so direct. Troy is an incredibly direct person, so is Marley. But they're also, I just loved that the deaf community are also so warm, because everything is so physical and everything is heightened. Like I found I find like trying to explain how I feel when I sign so hard, because I'm not very good with words, because it makes me feel so much. But I guess I loved portraying my feelings through a different medium. I feel like as an actor, you kind of get a script and you're like, okay, how am I going to say this line? How am I going to feel it? How am I going to? And in sign language, or acting through sign, I felt like it allowed me to kind of get out of my head, because you embody what you're saying. You suddenly become what you're saying. You're not even thinking about it, because you're kind of you're like, you are that thing. Like if I'm describing something as big, you don't just say, oh, big. You're like, you have to show how big it is, and suddenly you're not thinking about the word because you're being the word. And I absolutely loved that challenge, because I think how I would maybe like approach acting, if like in my previous films, it's less is sometimes, it's more, less is more, because sometimes if your movie goes to the cinema, your eye is the size of a bus. And I think when you internalize and you're actually feeling something, that shows. You don't have to do much else. But with sign language, it's the complete opposite. You have to show, you have to show it in your face, in your body language, in your expression, everything. And so it was a challenge, and it was completely different, but I loved it. I felt like it really kind of made me vulnerable.
Wow. Yeah. I'm wondering how much that's actually, if you've taken on new roles since CODA and you've actually acted in the past year, do you feel like it has impacted yourself already and how the choices you make and your body and everything?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
In my acting, and also in life too. I think
Hmm.
doing CODA and learning ASL, it really, really taught me the true meaning of communication. I love that Daniel, I'm going to use Daniel as an example. When we first started rehearsing, he asked for water, and the like AD like brought a water, and he was like, oh, like, thank you so much. And he kind of gave so much eye contact. And I think with like nowadays, I don't see people giving people that much eye contact. I think with mobile phones and all that, it's like people forget. And I just love with ASL that it's so direct. There's such a connection. There's eye contact, and I for sure have brought that into my real life 100%.
And with this character, we ultimately see that she does go on to pursue music. And I'm curious how much you've thought about just where she goes from here. Does this become a career for her? Like, what is the dynamic with her parents now? What's the situation after the credits roll?
That's a great question. Well, I really enjoyed that during the pandemic, we decided to kind of write a coda to CODA. And we wrote the Be on the Shore. And Sean was like, I want it to be a continuation. What is Ruby up to? How is she feeling? And it was such a nice excuse in the pandemic to kind of channel and dive back into kind of the CODA life. And I guess in the song, I like to think that she's at Berkeley having a really good time, but also I think because she is so close to her family. For me, when I go away acting and I'm away from my family, it's like I'm having so much fun and I'm being challenged and I love my job, but also I often miss my family and I think about them, and I like to think that's what Ruby's doing. But I also like to think, she's only in Boston, so I like to think she goes back all the time, because the Rossi family, they're so close and there's so much love. I feel like she goes home all the time just for a fish now and then, and to see them and to help out. But yeah, I think Ruby will definitely pursue music because she has a lot to say, and yeah, it's such a good question. I'm like, yeah, no, she moves back home immediately. Yeah, Rossi, CODA too.
I mean, I was even thinking like you could even make a whole series of CODA, really, because there's so many stories you could tell.
Yeah,
well, there you go.
Every time we do a Q&A, he talks to Sean about ideas for CODA 2 or a TV show.
The potential is there. But I mean, the film, it had a huge debut at Sundance, very big positive response. It won a bunch of awards. It continues to be nominated at the end of the year here. Can you describe just that experience of seeing the film that you started and that you were I assume you were very passionate about making it, actually connecting so much with audiences?
Oh, it's honestly, it's the best feeling. I think because I trained so long and I trained so hard for this movie, and I put so much into it, and so did everybody. It was such a special film to make. I think you can only hope that people love it or will enjoy watching it, and they have, like, more than I thought. People have loved watching it and related to it, which I love, you know, because this is a relatable crowd pleaser. The Rossi family is dysfunctional, and this movie, yeah, is relatable, but you're also learning about a culture that people don't really know much about. And Tessa Thompson actually said this when we sat on the round table together. She was like, this movie is like a big hug that everybody needs right now. And I love that, because it is, you know, I think because a lot of people have either been forced to, like, be apart from their family in the pandemic, or they've reconnected. At the beginning of the pandemic, I wasn't working, so I was able to go home and, you know, spend quality time with my family. But then I've been filming for the past 15 months and I've been apart from them. So, you know, this movie is kind of like that hug. It's relatable and it makes you feel good. And I think, you know, if the film makes you laugh and cry in the best way, you know, it's kind of irresistible.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's this beautiful emotional response. So
Yeah, it's nice that people have been feeling that. And I mean, there was a point in time when we didn't have Sundance and we didn't have Apple TV Plus, and Sean and I were kind of like, is anybody going to see this movie that we worked so hard on? Like, cinemas weren't opening up or anything. And then Sean called me and she was like, we're going to premiere Sundance. I was like, no way. And I was just so excited that we were premiering. I didn't even think about the award side of Sundance, or the, you know, the kind of
everything else that's followed here.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I also had never been to Sundance before, and Sean was always like, she was like, you don't know what you're missing. And I was like, no, I don't. This is the best. Like, I'm having so much fun. But it was kind of surreal and kind of weird too, because I was filming the night we premiered, and I was in a field in -25 in the snow, and then I'd suddenly look at my phone, it'd be like, oh, CODA, and then you put your phone away and you're like it never happened. And then, you know, you hear a knock at the door and there's this award on your doorstep. It's just such a weird, you're like, oh, but you can't celebrate with everyone. But I feel honestly so lucky and grateful for Sundance, but also for Apple TV Plus, because as you said, you know, we're still being able to promote this movie and people are being so kind about it. And we did release so long ago. So
almost a year.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks to them, everyone, for working so hard on this movie, because it's a special one.
Yeah, and I think that's a great note to end on. We are out of time, but for those of you watching, subscribe for more interviews and go to goldderby.com to make your Oscar predictions. Emilia, congrats on the success of the film, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your questions. I love them.